The first qualifying session of the 2025 season is over, and it has set the stage for a dramatic Sunday race. Unexpected eliminations, surprising front-row qualifiers, and missed opportunities have already sparked plenty of discussions. Two top-tier teams saw one of their drivers knocked out in Q1. McLaren secured an impressive front-row lockout, and Ferrari failed to capitalize on what seemed like a golden opportunity. But now, the big question is, where does each team stand after this opening battle in Australia, and what does it mean for race day? This was one of the most highly anticipated qualifying sessions in recent years. After a long 3-month break, fans were eager to see how teams would perform, and the first competitive session did not disappoint. Right from the start, things took an unexpected turn. A gearbox failure for Ban ensured that 4 drivers were practically guaranteed to be eliminated in Q1 based purely on pace. However, few expected Antonelli and Lawson to be among them, making their early exits one of the biggest surprises of the day. Mercedes had looked fast all weekend, so seeing Antonelli drop out so soon was a tough blow for their supporters. Unfortunately, there wasn't much he could do. Running wide at turn 4 damaged his car's floor, and that crucial mistake cost him valuable lap time in his final 2 attempts. Even with the damage, he managed to hold on to P15 for a while before ultimately being pushed out by Barretto. The surprising part? Barretto not only outqualified his teammate but did so as a rookie, despite being rated as a lower-tier driver by Marco. But Antonelli wasn't the only driver facing disappointment. Lawson, seen as one of Red Bull's future stars, endured a frustrating session. He had been struggling with balance issues all weekend, and his problems escalated in the final moments of qualifying. Repeatedly going wide, he finally lost control in the last sector, sliding into the grass. Looking back on his session, Lawson admitted that they had expected a tough start, but had planned to improve as qualifying progressed. However, an early mistake on his second lap threw everything off course. By the final run, his tires were already fading, leaving him with no chance to recover. Lawson's struggles didn't just affect his personal confidence, they also raised serious questions about his long-term position in the team. Heading into 2025, his path to Red Bull's senior team had already been uncertain, and now the pressure is mounting. This marks the 7th consecutive weekend in which he has been outperformed by his teammate, Koda, the Japanese driver who will start the race from an impressive P5. In fact, Koda is currently the closest competitor to Verstappen from the entire Red Bull family. The early races of the season were relatively close, but this latest result could be the turning point that shifts the team's trust away from Lawson. Red Bull had set a clear goal for him: stay within 0.3 of Verstappen's lap times to ensure they had 2 cars fighting for the Constructors' Championship. But his season has gotten off to a disappointing start, and failing to make it out of Q1 only adds to the concerns. Unfortunately for Red Bull, Lawson and Antonelli weren't the only disappointments in Australia. Ferrari, a team many expected to be battling at the front, struggled to keep up. Both of their drivers could only manage P7 and P8 after being outpaced by a Williams and a Racing Ball car. While changing weather conditions could still shake things up on race day, there's no denying that Ferrari is starting on the back foot. Throughout the weekend, it looked like P2 was a realistic target for Ferrari, and with a perfect lap, they might have even had an outside shot at pole position. However, a 4th-row start was definitely not part of their plan, especially with McLaren securing a dominant front-row lockout. Many now believe that Ferrari's SF25 car has been set up with Sunday's race in mind, as wet conditions are expected. But not everyone is convinced this was the right strategy. When asked whether Ferrari had deliberately focused on race day performance at the cost of qualifying speed, 7-time world champion Hamilton remained uncertain. "I feel good overall," he explained. "It's been a weekend of firsts, my first P1 session with Ferrari, my first practice runs, and my first qualifying. There's been a lot of work to adapt to this car, which is completely different from what I've driven in the past. It's been a learning experience, and I didn't expect us to be here. I wasn't sure if we'd be 9/10 or 8/10 off today, but we definitely have a lot to analyze. We'll dig into the data and figure out why we weren't on pace with the frontrunners. For Ferrari fans, and especially for Hamilton's supporters, there is at least one encouraging sign. His gap to Leclerc was not as large as some had predicted. At one stage, it was just a tenth of a second, though it fluctuated to around 3/10 by the end of the session. That's a significant improvement for the British driver, who is still adjusting to his new team and car. If he continues progressing, he could soon start applying pressure on his teammate. However, if Ferrari is only fighting for P6, that's far from the vision they had when they signed such a high-profile driver. Meanwhile, Leclerc's reaction to Ferrari's underwhelming performance was far more critical. Speaking after qualifying, the Monegasque driver admitted that their car's performance had changed overnight. Ever since this morning, the car hasn't felt the same as it did yesterday. I think we know where the issue comes from, but we need to go through the data to confirm it, he said. Unfortunately, we had to compromise a bit for the weekend, and that meant giving up some performance. I won't go into details, but P7 and P8 is a disappointing result. Even in my worst case scenario, I didn't expect this. While much of the focus has been on Ferrari's struggles, another team quietly delivered a statement performance: Williams. The Grove-based outfit managed to get both of their cars into Q3 for the first time in Australia in a decade. Their initial pace in Bahrain raised eyebrows, and their strong showing throughout practice in Melbourne proved that it was no fluke. Apart from McLaren and Ferrari, they were the only team to place two cars in the final stage of qualifying, a massive achievement for a squad that was only expected to fight for P6 at best. Now, a P5 finish in the Constructors' Championship suddenly seems like a realistic goal for Williams. If they maintain this level of performance, they could string together a series of consistent points finishes, exactly what they were aiming for when they signed Carlos Sainz to partner Alex Albon. Interestingly, it was Albon who shined in qualifying, securing P6 and beating both Ferrari drivers. Meanwhile, Sainz will start from P10, giving Williams a strong chance to challenge for a solid points haul on Sunday. With both Williams' cars inside the top 10, the start of the race is set to be a thrilling spectacle. Turn 1 in Melbourne is notorious for chaos, and with drivers like Leclerc and Hamilton starting further back than expected, they'll be desperate to make up ground early. That could lead to some intense wheel-to-wheel battles, and possibly some dramatic moments right from the start. Another major talking point from qualifying was McLaren's absolute dominance. The team not only locked out the front row but also demonstrated that their car is currently the most well-balanced on the grid. Meanwhile, Verstappen secured a strong P3 starting position, despite previously stating that Red Bull might not be competitive enough to fight for victory. But given his history of excelling in wet conditions, many fans believe that P3 is just as good as pole for him. If the race is indeed held in the rain, his ability to manage tricky conditions could turn the tide in his favor. This is exactly the kind of scenario that Helmut Marko and Red Bull are hoping for. The battle between McLaren and Red Bull will be the center of attention, with the McLaren duo facing their first true test. Can they convert their front-row advantage into a race victory? The internal rivalry between Piastri and Norris will also be fascinating to watch. Both drivers have made it clear that they won't back down, and with the season just beginning, team orders are unlikely to come into play. That puts McLaren team principal Zak Brown in a challenging position, as he must decide how to maximize their race strategy without compromising either driver's chances. Piastri, racing on home soil, has been particularly vocal about his ambitions. The young Australian is determined to make a statement and has insisted that he won't simply play the team game. With the McLaren cars starting at the front, but Verstappen lurking in third, the opening laps will be critical. If McLaren executes their strategy well, they could cement their place as the early season favorites. But if they make a mistake, Verstappen will be ready to pounce. The stage is set for a thrilling and unpredictable Australian Grand Prix. Wet weather, strategic gambles, and fierce rivalries. Everything is in place for an action-packed race. As anticipation builds for the race, one of the biggest questions remains: how will the changing weather conditions impact the strategies of the top teams? Forecasts suggest that rain could play a major role, which means teams must be ready to adapt quickly. Drivers with strong, wet weather skills like Verstappen could have a huge advantage, while others may struggle to find grip on the slippery track. One thing is certain: McLaren cannot afford to make mistakes. They have put themselves in the perfect position, locking out the front row, but that advantage can disappear in an instant if they don't manage the conditions properly. The battle between Norris and Piastri will be fascinating. Both drivers know that a win in the first race of the season could set the tone for the entire championship fight. But will McLaren allow them to race freely, or will team orders come into play? If things get too close, Verstappen, starting from P3, is the biggest threat to McLaren's victory hopes. He has built a reputation as one of the most ruthless racers in difficult conditions, and if the track is wet, his ability to handle low-grip situations could give him an edge. Red Bull may not have had the strongest start to the weekend, but they are always dangerous when it matters most. A strong start off the line could put Verstappen in prime position to challenge for the win. Further down the grid, Ferrari finds itself in an unusual position. The team was expected to be fighting for pole, but instead, both drivers are starting from the fourth row. If the race is dry, overtaking will be difficult, meaning Leclerc and Hamilton will have to be aggressive early on to make up lost ground. If the race is wet, however, things could get even more unpredictable. A well-timed pit stop or a safety car could completely change their fortunes. Meanwhile, Williams has emerged as the dark horse of the weekend. With Albon starting ahead of both Ferrari drivers, the team has a genuine chance of scoring big points. Their strategy will be crucial. Can they stay ahead of the faster cars behind them, or will they struggle to maintain their strong position as the race unfolds? All eyes are now on Melbourne as we prepare for the first race of the 2025 season. The grid is set, surprises have already shaken up expectations, and with the added uncertainty of the weather, this race could deliver an unforgettable start to the championship. With the grid set and all the uncertainties surrounding the race, the 2025 season opener promises to be an electrifying showdown. McLaren stands at the forefront, but their battle is far from over, with Verstappen in striking distance and Ferrari desperate to recover lost ground. Every decision on race day will be critical. The added unpredictability of the weather only raises the stakes, ensuring that no team can afford to take anything for granted. For McLaren, this is their golden opportunity to stamp their authority on the championship right from the first race. But will Norris and Piastri work together to secure the team's success, or will their internal rivalry create an opening for Verstappen? Red Bull, despite their struggles in qualifying, remains a serious contender, especially if the conditions favor Verstappen's mastery of wet weather racing. Ferrari, meanwhile, faces a difficult task. Starting from the fourth row was never part of their plan, and the team must execute a flawless race strategy to salvage a strong result. Leclerc and Hamilton both have the talent to fight back, but can they overcome the setbacks of Saturday and deliver when it matters most? Further back, the surprise performance from Williams adds another layer of intrigue. If they can maintain their position, it would send a strong message to the rest of the field that they are no longer just midfield contenders, but serious competitors. Albon and Sainz have a chance to score valuable points, but holding off Ferrari and Mercedes will be no easy task. As the lights go out on the first race of the season, all eyes will be on Melbourne. Every driver has something to prove. Every team has a strategy to execute, and every fan is eager to see how this unpredictable battle unfolds. Will McLaren convert their front-row dominance into victory? Can Verstappen spoil their plans? Will Ferrari find a way to fight back? These questions will be answered in just a few hours when the 2025 season officially kicks off. What do you think will happen in the race? Share your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to check out the next video on your screen for more insights.